Thank you for joining us today. I'm resisting the temptation to say good morning. It's very early here for me in the US because today we're having a very exciting chance to catch up with a whole bunch of folks in Asia. So this will be new and it'll be different. We're going to find out how things are different and what's going on. I think this will be a very interesting peek into contact in another part of the world. We're with Greg and Taniah and Shao today, and I'm very excited to hear more about their experiences. Greg, why don't you start and tell us where you are?
It's a kind of a landmark gathering here today. Hi, Linda. Nice to see you again. Hi, everyone. It's going to be amazing today. I'm originally from the US, but I've been in Japan for 15 years, and I'm going back between Tokyo and Osaka. In Tokyo, I'm really close to what everyone might be familiar with from the film Lost in Translation, is the scramble intersection where you've got like thousands of people crossing at every signal light change. It's called Shibuya. I've been there for about 3 years now, and after the Olympics and all through Corona, our stage in Tokyo kind of finished off, and I'm currently going back and forth between the Kobe area of Kobe, which is next to Osaka, and Tokyo. Originally, when I first came to Japan, I was way west, very close to Korea, in a small city called Fukuoka, which is about the size of Boston. That's really my kind of second home away from home. But about 5 years ago, I was guided and our project was moved to Tokyo, and it's been really exciting too.
That sounds very interesting. I think that making contact in a big city is probably going to be a great deal different than making it in the countryside. But you say you also spend time in Osaka. So is that also as metropolitan or is it more rural? How is that different?
The Osaka is the second largest city, so I'm really kind of town and country. We do retreats outside in the countryside all over Japan. So being central in Tokyo is easy to travel all over the country. We have an amazing, the bullet train system here, and the transportation is really, really convenient and all over the country. So in the city, I'm really more focused on lecture events or writing books and doing YouTube and stuff like that. So I make full use of, both town and country, you might say.
Very nice. Well, we're going to come back. I'm very excited to hear some more about that. Taniah, can you tell us where you're located, please?
I am living in Penang, Malaysia. It's an island, but it's a city. And so I'm a city girl. I have a big backyard behind my house, and so that's where I hold extraterrestrial training for the last couple of years before COVID. It has been really amazing. So many miracles happen to participants, when they come to such a gathering, because the extraterrestrials, our friends, will come and help them unconditionally, unconditional love. Well, the last few years I've been a little laid back, and so this is the time now to continue my mission. So my mission is not completed yet. So my mission is to enlighten the humans on this planet about our extraterrestrial friends, about the benevolence, about them not being what they are usually portrayed on the social media or on television. What else would you want to know, Linda?
Well, we'll come back. We'll come back in a little bit. For right now, I'm just trying to get a feel. So you're in Malaysia, in Penang. Is that how it's pronounced?
Yes.
That's an island. So you're in a city location, but you also have a big yard. And so you're also doing contact work in almost a little bit of a city type setting?
Yes. I mean, in the backyard, we are in a world of our own, right? And so when the extraterrestrials come in, we are just in our own world. It doesn't matter if it's a city or in the rural area.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you very much. Shao, would you like to share with us where you're located, please?
Firstly, thank you so much for inviting me. Hi, everyone. My name is Shao, Shao. So I'm an Australian Chinese. I'm based in Sydney. So my location is in the CBD in Sydney, so towards Sydney Bridge, Opera House location. It's also closer to where I work, so that's where I'm based, in Sydney CBD location. So yeah.
So you're in Sydney.
Yes.
Okay, so that gives us a frame of reference. We'll start going around now and get a little bit of idea of what your group is like. And then we'll come back and talk some about what your contact is like. So, Greg, can you share with us how many people there are in your group, maybe their ages, or if there's a unique demographic in Japan? So tell us a little bit about the people that you do this work with, please.
I basically was in Japan for 5 years, really kind of just doing the backpacker, traveler, expat English teacher thing. And then really my life mission really kicked in. I began to do the spiritual work here, especially focused on UFO research and disclosure, ET contact. And so as I was preparing to do just sort of like a meetup type of gathering, a very casual thing, suddenly two things happened. One, I got the first offer to write my first discussion book here in the genre. And also then the 3/11 disaster in Fukushima occurred, which really spurred a lot of light workers and awakened a lot of Japanese people for many, many reasons. And that also triggered me going full time into this kind of spiritual work. So over the course of 12 years, we've had 6,000 plus participants in just the contact retreats alone. I'm more of a nationwide. I was the first one to do CE5 contact in Japan, and basically the first one to bring the topic of disclosure out in Japan. So my core group is a collection of our most avid supporters and our long-term core group. And then really we just have an ongoing rotation of people coming to our events every year. We've done trips to New Zealand and America, Hawaii, other parts of the world. But really, we're mostly active domestically, pretty much year round, doing contact. So it's I'm living a crazy dream. It's my reality was really flipped upside down, and I've gone through several trials by fire, but always came through with new realizations, and the support we've had from the unseen worlds has been amazing and unwavering.
Wow. 6,000 participants. Greg, that's incredible.
Yeah, we're pretty much one of the first groups outside of CSETI to be active internationally, basically from what I can gather. In Japan, there's a very active network of events and workshops and lecturers in all different genres. So it's a small country, so there's a lot of people in the local areas who will invite an author or a speaker to have a lecture or a workshop. So just naturally, by putting out those first books, I just came into meeting different publishers and being invited all around the country. So it's been an amazing journey, a very organic one as well. And believe it or not, so many people are interested. So the information was quite taboo and very heavily controlled in the media here. So the fact that we were providing an unfiltered source for this brand new take on ET contact and extraterrestrial intelligence, the interest level here is very high.
So the topic is taboo, but you also saw a big surge of people after the 3/11 disaster. So the people in your group must be, maybe very forward, or, to come out against a very strong taboo. In the US, I would say it might be seen as silly or not particularly, what's the word I want? I don't know, not popular, but taboo is another level.
Well, I should say it's of course it's taboo in most countries in the world, but what I meant to say was it's been very controlled in the media, and we've had a very active disinformation campaign in Japan here for years, and the amount of coverage on TV is quite high compared to other countries. But it's a real bread and circus take, and they've really gone out of their way to make a caricature of ETs, and of course the Hollywood spin, the threat spin, and the fear spin. People know that that's not the truth, and so, like I said, the amount of people we've had come to us for new information just shows that there people here are hungry for the truth, and something that was different from this kind of top-down mass communication, corporate media take on this control of the topic. some people here call, Japan is, after the World War II, there was the GHQ, which General MacArthur really, with education, transportation, the whole rebuilding of Japan, these type of topics, national security topics were seriously controlled from that point on. So when it comes to the UFO issue, there's been an active program to really spin the subject since the early 90s.
Well, in a lot of ways, that sounds similar to what's going on here in the U.S. So I'm looking forward. We'll come back in a little bit and talk about the kinds of contact and experiences you have. Taniah, let's turn to you for a second. And can you tell me what the people are like that participate in contact where you are?
For me, it has to do with my career as a spiritual teacher and a spiritual healer. So from there, some of the practitioners have come to my contact workshops. And my contact workshops have only started for a few years before the lockdown. And so I started on the low key. I don't really advertise. And so my classes are normally small, about 8 to 10 people, 2 or 3 classes per year. That's all I have been doing for a few years. Each of these workshops, when I show you pictures and videos in future meetings, you'll understand what I'm saying. So the participants are therefore the spiritual practitioners, right? So until I decide, which I decide to do from next year, to really go on the platform, then I think more and more people will get to know about this. Right now, I can say I am probably the first one to start it in Malaysia and on the island of Penang. The people here are very naive. What they hear is what's in the media. Okay, and well, there are people who are enthusiastic, but I have not reached out to them yet. As I said, I'm just starting with my own homegrown practitioners. So it is still very new in Malaysia. And it's probably up to me now to catapult it on the upward, and also training my practitioners to go out and do CE5 work.
Sounds like you're coming from a smaller but very spiritual based. When you say that you teach, your classes are a spiritual class, what type of spirituality, what is the focus of your classes?
Spirituality to me is just about energy, but we say divine energy of very high vibration, energy from the universe. After the original basic spiritual training that involves ascended masters and Elohims and so on, when the extraterrestrials come in, I cooperated with them. Okay, so they to me, they are spiritual. They're very spiritual beings. They're compassionate, very high vibration, and they are beings of unconditional love. So whenever I seek their help, they will come and help me perform miracles. I mean, miracles to the common people, but to me, it's a norm because things just happen, right? The cripple can start to walk, for example.
That's really interesting. So what you're finding is the ETs are coming in on a healing basis to raise energy, heal people. So they're coming in a way for a particular function.
It's a very good question. You know why? Because what I want to say is that although my classes are small, 8 or 10 people, or even 12, but there is a lot of focus because of the number of people, the extraterrestrials that came, they actually address each and every one of them and ask them what would they like them to help out with. So maybe one example, this participant from India, she didn't ask for something for herself, but instead she said, my brother has been semi-paralyzed for 2.5 years. He couldn't walk. Can you help him? And the ET said to her, Well, in 3 days. If he doesn't get well, he has to look into his karma. Karma in the sense that he has to reflect on what he has been, not doing right for so many years. But we will help him. And so this participant stayed on after the workshop, and I, being that cordial host, I brought her around. And on the day after the workshop, she received a phone call while I was driving. And the phone call said that her brother walked to the bathroom. And that was that miracle. So he could walk now.
Wow. That really attests to the power of the contact with our extraterrestrial friends. Let me ask you just one more quick question about the people that you work with. Do you find that they are young, middle-aged, older, male, female, or are you getting a mix across the board?
Right, maybe because I'm female, I don't know. So most of my participants are female, but we have, let's say, out of the 8 of them, there'll be 1 or 2 who are male. Definitely there'll be 1 or 2 who are male. Whereas in my experience overseas, at least half the participants are male.
When you say overseas, do you mean in Singapore there's more men and there's fewer men in Penang?
Oh, okay. I mean in the United States. I've been to a number of retreats in the United States, yes. But in spiritual conferences, most of them are women. Only 10% are men. But in extraterrestrial conferences, many of them are men. That's my experience. But in my workshop, many are women.
That's very interesting. Very interesting. Thank you very much. We'll come back to that. Shao, could you share with us, please, what your groups are like, where you're located?
I think I want to focus on China a bit because we're talking about Asian in this episode. So regarding in China, again, I just want to emphasize that the topic of ufology and the spiritual topics and communities are extremely controlled by the local government. So I'm talking about the CCP, the Chinese government. So it's absolute a taboo in China. But despite the fact like that, you still got a massive Chinese are very much awakened. So how they carry forward is they may have a smaller, similar to WhatsApp gathering, online, like a smaller group of 4 or 5 people, just create a smaller group to have a chat. So how I got involved is I just, we're talking about back in 2015 to 2018. That was a period when the political control wasn't so stringent during that period, but now it's a different story. So a friend of mine invited to share my personal encounter stories with quite a few Chinese. And I saw that maybe just a few hundred people will listen to it. And all of a sudden people just tweeted my interview information videos, and that's how all of a sudden I became quite famous in China during that period. But eventually, due to political control, there's a lot of suppression in China, so that's a long story short. But that's basically the background information about how the Chinese able to get those information. So it's more about you do a video, then you record it, you save it, and it's more like a Twitter type. So you tweet it in what we call like a WeChat. You share those interviews with other people. Of course, a lot of time those interviews can be taken down, not just me. You got other Chinese who will share those information. So you need to be very quick. So they may send that interviews to 100 people or 50 people, in little pockets of different WhatsApp groups. We call WeChat. And then the people tweet again, they share, they listen to it. So I just want to touch on each topic just a bit so we can expand a bit later on during this interview. Regarding the type of Chinese, I think China is very unique in that sense, because when I attended the local group in Sydney, New South Wales, a lot of them, I'm talking about in-person meetings, monthly conference like that. A lot of them are elderly aged group of people in person, but whereas in China it's quite different. In China, I would say a lot of them are younger generation, even though you get people from different walks of life. But I would say over majority of them are between the age group of, could be junior high school towards 40 or 50 years old. But a very big chunk of them are between the age of 20 to 40 years old. So that's what I see in China. And then you got smaller groups of people like the early 20s or the late 60s. But mainly they're in that, relatively speaking, younger generation sort of group. And you get male and female, all sorts, so from all walks of life in China.
That's very interesting, especially the part about how the information spreads. It sounds like you just kind of pop the information in and then it pops out really quick and you have your network and it kind of maybe hops from person to person. Is that correct?
That's correct. So what happened is if someone invited me to share my information on there, like we're talking about an app that is not used in Western country, we call WeChat, because WeChat may have a more function, in those little app. So I may be invited by them to share my story like this one. And then they recorded this one, share with all the pockets of different groups. They may have 100 groups or 500 groups called different like spiritual community A, B, C, D, E, right? They share it, then they tweet the information and over again. So that's how the information is actually spread around in China. But you're right, they need to do it very quickly because those information can be gone very quick. Because once CCP realize, she may trigger certain sensitive words, like the words we're talking about, ascension, awakening, labeled by the officials as sensitive words. I'm talking about the word of ascension. Even like the religious words like Jesus. So if you don't tweet it quickly, that information can be taken down very quickly. So that's what's happening in China, unfortunately. So whatever Greg just shared with us is actually really much resonate with me. But I think in China, we have even stronger control by the local government, unfortunately. So that's what's happening right now. And after what I share my information for quite a few years, now if you try to search my name in China, my name is actually a sensitive word as well, because they don't like what I shared. So that's the situation in China. So it's very much a very controlled topic. So yeah.
Wow. So, Shao, are you under any physical threat yourself from the authorities for being arrested or censored on the internet? I hear that, but would they come and physically assault you or disturb you?
Wow, you just opened a Pandora box. So as I share with Greg and during different interviews, I did quite a few interviews online, and I also did 2 major conferences in Shanghai and in Beijing back in the end of 2018. That was like an in-person conference. So it was absolute success. We had literally more than 1,000 people attended just by the word of mouth. People know each other, they share, so they come. So what happened is after those in-person events in China, it was extremely difficult. Like you can't imagine how difficult to run those in-person conferences in China. It's crazy. There are people who jealous of you. Those are some people are special force, special agents. They're here just to ruin your conferences because they got instructions from their top dogs. They don't like it. So they will call police to ruin your conference. And I've been personally threatened. They blackmailed me, threatened my family. And we are talking about the official CCP newspapers got a big article about me, labeled me as alien cult leader having a conference in China talking about aliens. So the information I share in China is very, very fundamental, because I need to bridge the gap, gradually share more and more. So when I had my conference in China, it was it's called very entry level from the Western point of view. But even those very fundamental informations cannot be accepted by the CCP. So I had a lot of backlashes. People threatened me. And I even told by the global, it's called the Chinese CCP newspaper, like you should not come back to China. So I know the consequences. If I'm going back to China now, I probably will be put in jail. So it's quite serious in China right now, having sharing those information. Yeah, there are consequences.
Wow. That's incredibly brave of you. Very impressive. We'll come back to that in a little bit, Shao. I'm going to move on back to Greg now. Greg, can you tell us? I know that you and I were together with Dr. Greer on an expedition, so we're both familiar with the CE5. Now, are you staying strictly to the protocols with CE5 in Japan, or do you have other methods or modalities? So tell us exactly what your contact events are like, please.
I can attest to Shao's tribulations, because we just discovered that our interview was mysteriously deleted with no trace from my English YouTube channel. So new hurdles will appear as well. But I'm so happy we could gather today like this. In Japan, the active spiritual community, that they really welcomed us more so than the UFO research community, and that's really a lot of mostly made of women. That we have a giant spiritual festival here in Japan that has 30,000 attendees across one weekend, called the Healing Festival, and we've done a booth there in the last few years. And I think in their demographics there was 97% women and 3% male visitors. So there's a lot of housewives who keep it secret from their husband or family that they're going to a spiritual event, especially a UFO contact retreat. Like, we have to respect our guests' privacy at times, of course. And on the other hand, as far as up until Corona, I was more of the son, like a child or an elderly child age. Most of our participants were 50, 60, 70s, in the older generation, the baby boom of Japan generation. So they're really more focused on the print media. So, publishing in the genre here is very active. There's a few monthly spiritual magazines that we became quickly acquainted with. And over the course of doing so many events, being on the road so much, it's like my extended family here was like the elderly son, if not grandson age. So, and there was only a handful of even Japanese bloggers or authors in the 30 and 40 year age group. We've had a YouTube channel for 9 years, and YouTube finally took off thanks to Corona big time in 2020 in Japan. So we've really shifted from the print media to the online space. And as Shao described in China, that the average level of viewer or participant has really kind of come down to, I'm 45 right now, but I have a lot more people my age coming into sessions and gatherings, and then even now into the younger generation who are coming at this totally fresh. So it's really refreshing, because in the early days, a lot of our participants were more experienced than I was in the new age spiritual circuit. So I had the contact piece, but we had the spiritual veterans. Now that's really flipped, and a lot of people come and say, this is my first spiritual event, or this is my first private session. That's a whole new paradigm for us. As far as the protocol goes, I spent the first few years, trying to translate some of the main CE5 meditations, what you might call the CTS, the coherent thought sequencing, and really, I came back to Japan in 2010 with the CE5 manual, the working group manual, a laser pointer, and a couple walkie-talkies, and this whole network started from there. So slowly but surely translating the protocols into Japanese and into a lecture, a PowerPoint presentation. From the very beginning, though, I'm originally a sound engineer and I do audio engineering. So from the early days, I also incorporated the solfeggio tones in the field, had people tone to match that. And in the early days, we'd had no audio of the meditation. So I would have someone in the group read the CTS guidance from a printed out piece of paper. So the protocols really do work. The contact trilogy and all that stuff is just so spot on. And I was really attracted to it because it really dovetailed with my own experience. Just reading the manual was just like a checklist of everything that I had already experienced personally after my first real contact experience, 2007. And so then over the years, we've slowly started to incorporate more energy work, using the circle and using people's bioelectric fields to kind of charge up and take a shortcut into the energetic component of contact. And then also the other really big dynamic is, of course, the land clearing. In Japan is 80% mountainous. So the amount of land that's actually usable for living or farming or recreation is quite limited. So people here are very aware of the spirits in the land, the ancestral spirits. A lot of the work becomes sort of like a land cleansing, and so we are actually guided to go to places that might have quite a high load of sort of astral entities, or it's in need of a cleanup, you might say. So the sort of grid work element is there as well. That's more of an ascension light worker thing, I guess. But we've been aware of that. We've been deliberately sent into very, very remote pockets of Japan, all over Japan since the get-go. And then that's the kind of grid work, working with the earth grid element as well.
Wow. I'm rather struck that it seems as though in Japan and in Malaysia, there is a very deep spiritual element and a healing element that seems to bring people into this. In the US, I think it might be a tiny bit different. I don't know that there is quite as much interest in the healing aspect as there is in the contact off world, an extraterrestrial interest rather than a healing interest. Would you say that's true?
It's a mixture. I mean, I think the nuts and bolts people, the people who want, mostly men, they want to know they want to see proof, and of course we have people who want to have photographic evidence, and I've had to ask people to turn off the cameras at times, because the ETs always want us to have that the real experience, the sort of a raw experience to get used to the way they communicate at first, and so. It's like that. I remember the first time I went to Europe, I took so many pictures that I kind of forgot what it was like to be there. Look, you just there through the lens, the viewfinder. So that's a whole new learning curve for us humans in the field there. So, but yeah, and then the ET healing element, those are two pieces that aren't really often connected. So for me, it was discovering that stuff through the ET contact. So my entranceway was ET contact, and then slowly but surely, now we can call it spiritual ET contact. And then finally, you realize that the most ultimate level of that can be manifestations of different healing, and a manifestation itself. Opening up people's connection to the causal field, which allows them to supercharge their creativity and their sort of manifestation potential. So it's all a matter of how field work is presented. And I also was really adamant about having phenomenon. I wanted to have a 5 sense level phenomenon. So I really worked hard at each gathering. And there were several times where most people would have given up, but then I pushed through, and something really did appear. So we had many nights where we were right on the brink of the break point, where it's like, no, it's not going to happen tonight. And then we just hit mass coherence, and then boom, the ships appeared. And, I was able to see them right when I got into the field. So I knew they were there. It's a matter of that shamanism where you have to then guide the group to that level. That's, for me personally, how the energy element came in. So learning the trade of the shaman, the modern shaman, and working with the land, and becoming aware of the components that are not seen, the support and the interference that's involved with the work. So that was a real training, like a magic Hogwarts school, and definitely learning some hard knocks along the way, because there were several people who were just there to play tricks on me, or ego games, and of course in Asia there's a lot of this hidden magic, which kind of gets pretty esoteric. But the chi energy, taekwondo or taikyoken, and a lot of the spiritual arts in Asia are very active with the chi energy, and so they might not be government agents, but they are well versed in this kind of hidden obfuscation. So I had trouble with that in the beginning, with people screwing with my energy and misleading members and stuff like that. So that was a whole very, very deep esoteric learning curve for me, which I'm thankful for now. Yeah.
I will tell you that early on, I also experienced psychic interference by attendees, so I'm a little bit familiar with that. But very quickly before we move on, are you staying strictly with a CE5 protocols, or do you just kind of adapt and go with the flow? And I'm particularly interested in how you bring your group to coherence.
That's great. Yeah, it's amazing. It's gotten simpler and simpler over the years, and it's been pretty much me. The Japanese are very into they've had the very, sensei, the teacher, and the student paradigm is very ingrained here, as you can imagine. So people really come to our events and ask me, they expect me to be the navigator. So I wear many hats as far as doing all the prep and all the stuff in the field pretty much. And then whether that be some video shooting videos when I have a chance, or leading the meditations and working with all the gear. So it really changes from night to night. One thing that's different, I noticed that in the US and with the Sea City, they really dig in to that one location over the whole week, whereas we're very mobile. And Japan is amazing because it's very safe here. Of course, it's one of the safest places in the world, and there's no real trespassing laws. So all parks, all beachfronts, all private property pretty much is open and free reign, without, there's no police at night. It's actually contact heaven. So no permits, no police, no interference. We've had, after hundreds of events, we've only had one incident where a drunk person kind of came in and said, "Hey, I usually use this place. Get out of here." But other than that, it's been amazing. So through the years, though, we've like I said, gone into more of the ascension work with downloading energy, and I don't do too many things with the messages or channeling, but I am very sensitive to energy now. So we find that a lot of the members get sort of like a big upgrade, like a real big energy download, and that really is the stuff that really lasts and resonates in this kind of like changing the actual energy field of the human body and stuff like that. So, but even with the simple mystery, the crop circle tones, even the simplest parts of the protocol work wonders. And it's amazing how that whole C5 consciousness, it's really like a network. It's a gestalt of its own. So just by plugging into that with the right attention, it's like accessing a global Wi-Fi network, and the guides are there. In closing, is that we don't have to do full-on vectoring, and it kind of ties into what I said before, that most of the time the ships are already there. So at the current moment, I use another dowsing technique to discern our event schedule for the entire year. I used to have to do really 3 months at a time. I could only see forward 3 months at a time, but now up until recently, I was doing half a year up to a full year in advance. So then I always just tell people, look, we plan this event with the guides, so of course they're going to be here. It's just a matter of when and how they'll show up. The idea of vectoring it's not really something that we really consciously focus on. And as far as the coherence thing, that's really what's been so easy for me, is that inherently in the Japanese culture, it's such a positive trait with their group activity, like the working together, the cooperation that they learn from a very young age. So they have a high coherence level to begin with. Even with my lack of experience in leading meditations in the beginning, it was really, really easy to have that lack of ego and just have everyone on the same page and very open to, just see what happens. That was really what was the key for me to brush up my skills and become a really more advanced group leader quickly.
Well, that sounds absolutely fascinating. I have to say, now I really want to come to Japan to do content.
Yes, we'd love to have you. We finally have the borders open, so it's been strange seeing other Westerners on the bullet train and stuff. It's like we went back into isolation here during lockdown. So one thing I've been thinking about recently is that as of next year, I would like to have a 1 or 2 events with people coming to visit from abroad. We were preparing for that with the Olympics, of course, in 2020. Well, that all got put off until last year. So things to look forward to for sure. Yeah, please come on out.
Thank you very much, Greg. Taniah, now I'm really curious to hear how things are in Malaysia.
How I conduct the workshop? Well, I do filter my participants. But anyway, most of them are from my spiritual practitioners. So I have not encountered any resistance, or anyone doing black magic or anything like that. If they do, they will not be able to penetrate the kind of field we set up before the workshop. To me, I feel it's very important to educate the people when they come for the workshop, to educate them in the sense that they are prepared to go into the field and not go in being afraid or wondering what's going to happen because of all the brainwashing from the media. So I do my training with them first, and to enlighten them about who are the extraterrestrials, right? And my experiences. And also, very importantly, I open up their third eye and I open up their heart chakra. So they are all loving and all ready and all psychic before they go into the field. Okay, I do have a plan of what I want to do in the field, right? So because I'm used to organizing things, so I do have a plan. But let's say more than 50% of the time, they don't go according to my plans. Because sometimes the moment we hit the field, the ETs will just come into me and then things blast off from there. Something I want to share particularly is this. I'm someone in the past who don't like channeling because I was thinking, these people who channel, are they real? Yeah, I believe maybe at least half of them are real, but, maybe some are not. So I'm not someone who used to channel, although I've been trained in channeling. But, in my experience out in the field, when the energy comes in so tremendously, you can't hold it. And the words just come out. Then I know that is real channeling. That is the truth, because it's not me talking. Although I may be aware, I may be 10% there or 20% there, but it's not me, because I would not be able to use the words in those sentences. It's not me, I will not. So I know that's true. So I will never channel unless the energy comes in so tremendously. I know that's good for the participants. So, like I say, my plans may not work out because when the ETs come, things just happen. And I'll be directed by the ETs on what to do next with the participants. So what happens in the field? Well, healing takes place. Channeling means messages come in for them, profound messages. And sometimes the ETs will address each of them, maybe help them solve their problems. We have photographs where the participant is just sitting there and I have disappeared. I'm behind them, but I'm like semi-translucent because the ETs has come in and merged with me. And I do drumming. Actually, drumming is one of the highlights of my training because they zone out. Every participant just zone out, okay? And we have photos of ETs, circling around the drums and lights, balls of light coming in and that kind of thing. What else would you like to know?
Well, it sounds like you have a very different experience in some aspects, that you've prepared your people deeply, that you're coming out of a class. Your class is already coherent, but it seems like there's also some similarities in that the society may have a tendency to be a little more coherent coming into this event than Americans or, Westerners might be. Is that true?
In my case, like most of my participants are spiritual practitioners. In a way, they are nearer to being incoherent. And because of the training, I think it was very easy to unite them. Basically, I focus on love. And compassion. So they're all there in unity. They're all there to experience, to not judge. Maybe they can evaluate, but really to experience.
That's really cool. Now I want to come do contact with you too.
Yeah, next year I will start all my contact workshops.
Thank you very much. Shao, I am absolutely fascinated. I can't wait to hear how things might be in Sydney and also in China if they can do contact at all. Can you help us understand?
There's quite a few points I want to mention in response to your query. So let's focus on China a bit because Australia is relatively very similar to USA. It's very open. People are very freely. They can organize any events they like. But in China, people don't understand is that everything we do in real life, we have to concern about the political consequences. So let me give you an example. Like if you want to hold, say, e-city events, or Taniah may want to have a different smaller group gathering, that's all your choices, right? You can advertise it, you can just attract your friends. But in China, we have a policy. Depends on in which city you're based. If you want to hold, at least that's my understanding in Shanghai, if you want to hold a smaller gathering for more than 40 people, let's say, you need to get a local police station permit before you can have those in-person events. But again, each suburb, it's very strange, have a different rule. Some suburb may say, oh, it's more than 150 people. You need to get a special permit. If it could be some other place, could be 40. Reason being, they don't want you to have those smaller gathering because they don't want you to create those potential wave. Any potential catch up may cause, like the incident like what we see now. As Greg know what happened in China right now. It's called, what's that called, Greg? It's like a white
white paper demonstrations, I think.
Demonstrations. Yeah. So any smaller trigger can cause like a civil strike. So that's why they are very concerned about spiritual awakening in China. Because once you awaken, you're more aware about what's going on. So in-person events in China, you need to get a special permit. So especially for spiritual community and ufology community, those are the heavily targeted areas that the CCP doesn't want to see people to be awakened. So most of the events you see in China are done online rather than in person. The only one I've tried in China, which is in Shanghai, the Beijing conference, was extremely difficult. And eventually we made it through, quite successful, but I had a lot of backlash from CCP. So that's the first thing I want to mention. So in-person events is extremely difficult. But if you want to make it a very smaller group, like 10 people, 20 people, you may get away with it. So you may hear some Chinese spiritual teachers will say, I disagree with Shao. I've been held, this kind of conference, like not conference, like events, workshops for years. I never get into trouble, for sure, because they are having smaller groups, like we're talking about 10 or 20 people, not talking about the one I had, like a few hundred people. So you need to get a special permit. So that's a point number one. Point number two, regarding online events, depends on what timing. So if you had events back in 2015 to 2018, that was when I think for President Xi was his like a first sort of like a term in China. Now he's having his, the second term in China. So now he's having his third term in China. So during that time, the political climate is starting to get a bit harsher, but not fully closed down yet. So during that time, people like me and many others, we could still share certain information, talk about it. But now it's extremely difficult. So that's the second one I want to share. I can give you quite a few real life stories. So I've got quite a few friends in China who are very much in the spiritual community, like I'm talking about movers and shakers in China. So one person I know very well, he's a great person, he's a great guy in China. He's actually running the largest spiritual platform in China called the Sky Channel. And I've got a friend of mine run the second largest one in China. So what happened is 2 months ago, the second guy's, how you call it? It's like an e-newsletter, sort of like something like that. being shut down by the CCP. So they will not allow you to share any further information with any third party or the public. So any sensitive words like ascension, spirituality, ETs, sort of taboo in China. You may get away with, one-on-one conversation with each other, but if you want to have a more larger gathering, it's going to be quite dangerous. So yeah.
If you have a contact event online, and I fully understand non-locality, but how do you actually, what are your protocols? Do you do meditations? Do you do coherent thought sequence? Are the ETs ready and waiting when you show up? What is your actual protocols for an online contact group?
Every one like me, we have a different way of sharing our information. The way how I share my information is I don't present myself as a teacher, not teaching other any specific information. My approach is more sharing my own life stories because I want my life stories to resonate with more people. For example, the first interview I did is I shared about my occupation, my real name, what happened to me in my life, how I encountered the ETs and see UFO. So that really attract a lot of sort of people's response. I'm like, oh my God, that happened to me as well, blah, blah, blah. And then that's how I actually got in contact with those persons. And then the second interview, what I did is I shared my email address. So I encourage other people who are having a similar experience to email me. So I really want to have that kind of like a contact with my viewers in China because it's a very censored area. I want to see what's actually going on in China. So I've got hundreds of emails from Chinese sharing their story that's what happened to me, this and this. So that's how I actually got those data from Chinese. Like, oh, okay, 70% of Chinese people are going through this stage of their, spiritual revolution. 30% are going through this spiritual revolution. So I kind of can see where they are at in their life transformation phase. And then during my next interview, I'll just share part of my story and then respond to say Joe Blow or Mary Jane regarding her experience, but do not mention their name. I said, Mr. P mentioned about his experience, blah, blah, blah. Then my view is this and this. So people like to listen to that because they want to get that confirmation from me. Well, listen to my story. Listen to how I share other people's story about what's going on in their life. So it's more like offer them a comfort, like, oh my God, I don't have much information in China, but listen to Shao. Now I know that I'm not the only person having those kind of experience. So that's why they like to listen to those things. So my way of sharing is not to teach them how to do yoga, how to channel ETs. It's more about what's going on in China now, what other people are going through, how to resolve those issues, like, say, spiritual attacks or entity attachment, how you get further information regarding UFO ETs from what website, which platform. So my way is about sharing stories, information, informative, where to find things, how you deal with certain transformation. So that's what I did. Yeah. There are a lot of people in China like me, but I have to say, like, they are very low-key, extremely low-key. I understand that because, Linda, most of them are based in China. So they need to be extremely cautious about what they can say or they can't say. Whereas, like, a person like me, I'm overseas as a, Australian Chinese. So I can say whatever I want to say. That's why I got into trouble in the end. Yeah. That's what I want to share regarding my story and what's going on in China.
So it sounds like in China, the contact that happens is probably much more on an individual basis than a group organized structure, and that the position that you take is information conduit acting as a facilitator for information flow between individuals. Would that be correct?
I think mostly correct. And another thing I want to mention, I love this topic, is that it's to do with Asians, especially Chinese personality traits. Because what happens is in a Western country, say something happened to my Aussie friend or American friend, you can see a lot of videos on YouTube. People say, oh my God, like, Linda, this is what happened to me. So they can record that conversation, share on YouTube. Within China, even though the information are extremely censored, let's assume that what if it's not censored? I'm not sure about in Malaysia or in Japan, but as a Chinese, I know that a lot of Chinese personality traits, they are more reserved. So whatever happened to them, they are very reserved. They don't want to share. So a lot of time when I got hundreds of emails, I say, that's a fascinating information, Joe Blow. Why don't you just share it with other people, So they say, oh, yeah, but I don't want to share with my families. I don't want to share with my friends. I just want to email you and just let you know what you think. So it's a very private for them. I think it's to do with the culture and the personality traits for certain race. Yeah. So that's why, because of lack of information flow due to political reason and cultural reason, so that makes spiritual awakening a bit difficult for Chinese. Because what if something happened to them? A lot of time for us, we just need that little smaller push or validation, that happened to you, Linda. Oh, I can confirm this happened to me. Is that what this and this? But if you don't get that validation or confirmation from a third party, people just don't know what to do with it. How can they deal with that situation? So that's why you get a lot of Chinese who are very spiritual, very aware. They just lack of that little bit of confirmation element. So just lack of communication with each other. Yeah.
Wow, that's really different.
Shao became like the contactee and abductee hotline, the support group, for China.
What happened in Japan, Greg? Like, how about in Malaysia? Like, is that how Japanese personality traits like, or they are more willing to share? Like,
yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I will say something not about Malaysia first. Many years ago, I was in US. Can't remember exactly where now. I was in US and I was giving one of my first talks on extraterrestrials. At the end of it, we have people standing up, Americans standing up and they were crying. And I asked why. They say, I've not been able to share what I know, what I have experienced. And now I see someone come up and be able to share, and that make me cry. So it's not only Asians, but yes, I agree with you that Asians have this more reserved personality. I do agree. And also the government, right? The government control. Now, back here in Malaysia, I think, as I said, that people are very naive, and we don't really have that much of the kind of government control. So for now, it's still free flow. We can still do what we want. In fact, pre-COVID, I gave my book to the chief minister of Penang. He gave a talk on something. The moment he finished and sat down, I just went to him and passed him the book. And so what he did with it, I have no idea. But I thought at least I did something there. Maybe an eye-opener to him, or he just sat on it. No idea. For the time being, no idea. But this is the kind of scenario we have in Penang, in Malaysia. And like I said, I'm just the first person to start all this contact experience, and we're still very new. So we'll see what happens from next year.
And when Shao says dangerous, she also means dead. And Linda, when you and I were in the field with Dr. Greer, I had shared an episode. I can't go into much detail, but we know of at least one person, very well-known figure around the world, who was taken out in China. And I decided not to share the story in the field in Oracle, just to keep the vibe high. But yeah, that was one point. And when she says data, Shao mentioned she had this data. That brings up a whole other level of one of the deeper things that they don't want the civilian groups is having too much of this data that the intelligence community really wants to have their hands on. So it's sort of like that cat and mouse game where however much we can be a storefront for them with signal intelligence and the NSA type of monitoring, and they're looking at all our communications and stuff. So that's good up until a point, but when that starts to be a big spiritual force or a force of change, then it's a different story. And we've also seen what I'm going to really call it from now on, the op in Japan. The entire dialogue, the UFO subculture was controlled from a top-down perspective with primetime TV shows and primetime TV series here. The entire subculture was controlled from the top down, pretty much from the get-go. And what we've discovered really is behind that, and this has been admitted by one of the key figures, he's a TV producer here, admitted at a lecture in the US in English. He was quite close with Wendell Stevens and that group. And so basically they were using it. They were trying to mine. It's like a mining operation for abroad, say they're mining Japan. And so they need a very popular figure who's going to act as a magnet. And when someone has a UFO sighting, oh, we need to get this video or this photo to that guy. He's the point of contact for everything UFO. So that's the celebrity factor and the mass media control, the bread and circus manipulated by the intelligence community. To the T. Textbook example is Japan, and so we've noticed that they over the years retiring, passing the baton to other people in the field, and then this kind of thing where there's this specter of them trying to gather data through different groups and stuff, and people who aren't really doing the real research. So one of those really you've seen in the media with the whole Fukushima UFO lab, so to speak, which is an entire media stunt, and the people behind that are running one of the biggest all of their UFO information is complete disinformation. It's an occult mad magazine, but it's the number one production. It's a number one magazine in the genre. It's published by a toy company here, not a video game company, but an actual toy company, like a plastic model. And they just so happen to have a monthly magazine that's been out here for 30 years plus. So this really top down corporate pyramid system in Japan, the whole hive mind, the hive society that's the really big dark side. That's why we've had so much support from the unseen, is because we're one of the only few oases away from that. And that's also with my role. Everyone asks me, why is an American person doing this in Japan? It's like, well, you have a lot of these other researchers, but we found that they get eaten up by the machine, and no real researcher gets put on TV with any credibility, or they've had their panel of the UFO mafia, as I call them. That's of course discussed in detail in some of Dr. Greer's books. But yeah, it's totally the situation here. So having to go against that machine has been not fun, and we've had some really big breakthroughs in the past few years, but the op has been oppressively pervasive up until now. Yeah.
All of you have my utmost respect for what you've had to deal with here. It makes like what we have to deal with here in the US look like a picnic. I can't imagine dealing with that and the amount of bravery that it takes to persist in the face of this kind of opposition. So I will say that you have my deepest respect, all of you.
Cheers.
So I would like to move on to two things. Now, Greg, earlier you said that you're dowsing for your contact locations, and I'm very interested in that because I have started dowsing lately. And then I would like to go on to the kinds of contact, the types of entities that are coming in, and the communications that you're getting. So let's cover the dowsing very quickly and then move on to who's coming in and what their messages are.
Okay, yes, my first experience was at Isetti Ranch in Mount Adams, and so I've sort of been in between the two worlds of two major contact groups in the U.S. and over the years, I've kind of picked up one of their techniques over there, which is connecting with the guides. And my newest book, this just come out this year, I took that a step further into a method that I call ET transcommunication. And it's not messages, but it's more of the energetic, it's connecting with the ETs energetically. And one of the ways that I first really interacted with that was with the what they call table tipping. It's a large format of dowsing. It uses a bit of kinesiology, but it's harder to make a mistake with it because it's such a big thing, such a big object. And there's precautions that are taken to make sure that you're getting the highest guidance. So that's something that we really trained quite a bit during our tours to the US with our Japanese groups. And just translating for several hundred people, I started to pick up the pattern recognition of the major groups that interact, with us a lot of the times, and that gets into the whole star seed and the off-world past life thing as well. But basically, very practical applications, because a lot of the places I would go to have an event I had never been to before. So of course, I take my location hunting very seriously. So I would always 9 times out of 10 try and see the place before. And then you've always had the experience where it looked good in the afternoon, but the field site was no good at night, for one reason or another. So as Taniah mentioned, often things change and you can never predict how it's going to go right on that day. So the location hunting used with the guides really helped me facilitate like a much more higher level of accuracy. And we might have 2 or 3 options, so I'm looking at the Google map, and a lot of times in the beginning, it was just my inspiration, my instinct. So I was getting the guidance just by looking at the map, and people would be amazed, like, how did you know this place? Like, even locals don't really go there, So in the beginning, it was just pure inspiration, pure instinct. And then I started to use that table tipping to do the dates and the times, and that's really ensured to have our very high contact rate. Like I said, I was, putting my entire body and spirit into the work every time. So I'd say we have a visual confirmation rate of 95% and above for several hundred events, where we're seeing most of the group is seeing something at the same time, or we have some sort of phenomenon that's visual. So we're mobile, we're standing at times, we're moving locations, but we're also being guided. So our contact work is very different from what you might see during a full retreat in Sea Seti or even sky watching at Mount Adams. But I really push the limits and really don't give up until most of the group has been stimulated or has had that kind of visual confirmation. Sometimes that's literally when we're opening the door to go home on the car. We've had events where it's like, oh man, we knew they were there in the field, but we didn't see anything. And then open the door, and then boom, the light flares up on the ocean. There's always some sort of magic that happens. So the message is that through the amount of visual confirmation we've had, and the amount of manifestation of craft and orbs and flash bulbs and all different sorts of strange weather phenomenon, visual and 5 sense phenomenon, the persistent message is just support and really that cosmic level of love and thanks and just sort of enlightenment, enlightened energy. And it just uplifts the whole group, uplifts the whole spirit. And even though we haven't slept that much, the people the next day are just super lucid and energized, and it's really a full body experience. Of course, people along the way get personal messages and things that they're worried about, but really it's the experience. Just by getting to the field and taking part in the work, you're getting so much energy in from like the 5th dimension or the causal field that it really just stimulates any hangups or any really emotional blockages or sort of energy blockages in your life. That's one of the more amazing parts of contact for me.
It sounds like you're getting experiential and visual, and maybe a little bit of individual messaging channeling. Wow.
Yes. Yeah.
Taniah, how are things for you?
Okay, you were asking about how do they find the location? Well, I find the dates to hold a workshop. I do dowsing as well. I do spiritual dowsing. And I will ask the ETs to choose the date. And then when I got the date, but because my location is behind my house, so I don't have to ask about location. But should I have to ask about location, I would still douse and ask the ETs, well, is this better or this better or this better? So I hope that answers your question. And what else am I supposed to talk about?
I have another question for you about the dowsing. What technique do you use? Do you use a pendulum or do you a physical or?
I use my L-shaped dowser, my metal dowser. The rods, yes. I'm not really dependent on it because when I become a channel, I'm just getting answers as it comes. But the dowser will be a good validation.
That don't know what dowsing rods are here. So here's my dowsing
Yeah,
rod.
this is a dowsing rod. I can get mine to show you. I'll get mine.
Okay.
And here's the table. Right here. This thing is very cumbersome. It's a small side table. Yeah.
So the people who don't know about the table dowsing, you put your hands on the table, and then the table will rise or rock when you hit the correct. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just a large format Ouija board in a way, because it gets you get the similar answer, like alphabet numbers and yes, no answers as a base. Yeah.
That's what my friend tried on the soil. It's very interesting. So
yeah. So basically, one has to be very neutral, and that's the main training, to be neutral before you douse. And normally, if you're very passionate about, in my view, if you're very passionate about a question, a subject, the answers are 100% accurate because you want to know, not that, you're inclined to this way or that way, because you want to know. And so you get a good answer. And that's why every workshop is a great success. There isn't one that isn't a great success. And then I'm going to just say a few things that come to mind. I think it was Linda who said that some of the people have to get permission to attend the workshops and so on. I did have one participant, a lady, she had to, when we take photographs, she had to put on a mask, a face mask, because she didn't want her husband to know that she came to the workshop.
Oh, interesting.
She was that cute. And so I made this, the Star Wars mask, that Star Wars mask. So it's just so funny.
That's charming. Yeah.
So until today, her husband didn't know she came to the workshop.
Wow. So she's
because she knew that we might put up the photos on Facebook, you see.
Yeah, I see. Wow. Okay.
I like to share something very important because this is something I have not shown the world. Unicorns. From all the workshops, I got all these photos about extraterrestrial, the crowds with all these contact experience, so on. So I was curious. In one particular workshop, I call the shots in the sense that because I organize it. So I said, okay, this particular workshop, I want to know about the existence of unicorns because they are also out of this world, And that particular workshop, I created vegetation where I bring the participants to the ETs, the unicorns, wherever the planet is, and have a communion with them. And then we invite the ETs to come to us. And guess what? They appeared in our photos. The unicorns with a horn, the two legs, right? And they came in teams, so I had a few photos of them in teams, and they're highly energetic. So it's very muffled, but you could see the horn and the two legs and the face, okay? So from then on, I tell you, my participants were all smitten, and all of them have unicorn toys in their house, and I have lots of them. And here is one, lots of them in my house, and I have doused. If you have a unicorn image in your house, it has a lot of energy, a lot of high vibration. So go ahead and buy your unicorn stuff, okay? So it's like I put up these, they are very highly energetic. So they support me while I'm talking to you, for example, and they spread all the vibrations all over my house. And so unicorns are real, and so are mermaids, and so are dragons. And so during the lockdown, COVID time, I made an effort to connect with the dragons and with the unicorns. Really stress, every day when I meditate, I connect with them. So it's really amazing. So if I want to have workshops on them, just on unicorns or just on dragons, I could do that. But I always view myself as semi-retired. So I'm doing things taking things a little slower pace. So unless you trigger me, then I will come in and work.
I'll have to get the unicorns. We just put up a lion. We've had this issues with our apartment. It's like a highway for spirits, it seems, and we just finally put up a guardian lion in the stairway. But I'll have to get some unicorn stuff too. Thank you. Yeah.
For your baby.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. She's super sensitive. So sensitive. Yeah. But we have a dragon helper. So part of the reason why we've been asked to move to the Osaka Kobe area is because there's a giant dragon line. It's called the 135th parallel, the 135 line, and it's a dragon line. And the entire mountains behind the city of Kobe, called Rukko, they're very well known as a UFO spot, and it's what we've found. It's also an inner Earth entrance, and also there's a lot of dragons in the area. So we've had a female dragon spirit really guide and really protect the baby here as well. Yeah, it's quite amazing. Yeah.
Well, that's really different. I am so gonna get a unicorn, and I'm gonna see if I can make contact with dragons, because I think that's absolutely fascinating. And it's common to see dragons in Asian literature and fables and stories. So there's got to be something to it, because it's very pervasive. So Shao, let's turn to you now. It's going to be maybe a little bit odd because your people have difficulty communicating, but can you give us a little bit of an overview of the kinds of experiences that they are having?
I think all the information I've gathered from China is that they are having extremely similar experiences, like the one you have in Western country, the positive, the neutral, and the negative encounters. But what's really surprised me, which is a big shock, is after when I release my email to my audience, I said, look, great, you guys listen to my interviews, but if you want to get in contact with me, please email me with your stories. I'd like to hear from you. What really shocked me is all of a sudden, even though I got all the emails, over 70%, no kidding, the emails I've got are seeking help. So the message, I really wish I can share some really positive vibe information. Of course, there's a lot of positive encounters, but over 70% of emails I've got people complaining about having entity attachments, which is very concerning. So I wasn't expecting this kind of thing to happen. I was thinking maybe, people say, oh, I saw UFO the other day, which I do receive those emails. ET encounters, very positive, neutral, negative. But a lot of time, the emails I've got are people complaining this phenomenon in China seems like very looming issues, and they don't know what to do. Because it's the information control, people come to me say, I've got this issue. This happened to my family members. This happened to me. What could I do about it? So those are literally number one biggest issue in China right now, based on the hundreds of emails I've received. So I have addressed those issues in my interviews. And, once I was famous during that time, so I've got some good connections, because the more famous you become, the more connections you will have in the community. So I know quite a few, Greg may know, maybe Taniah know, there's quite a few spiritual people in China. They know how to use qi, they're, we have a different term in the Western country. So I contact them and I said, look, why don't I share your contact details with those Chinese? Because they are in need of help. Surely we all every now and then may have spiritual attacks, even happened to me, to be honest. But I wasn't expecting to having those kind of emails complaining about that issue. So the point I want to really mention that this entity attachment issue is really number one issue in China in the spiritual community right now. So you don't hear people talk about it, but judging by the emails I receive, that's quite overwhelming. So I want to just mention that. So, and then I wrote back to them. I say, look, you are not alone. I want to give them a comfort. Based on the emails I've received, this happened to this person, that person. So what I recommend is try to contact this person. Maybe this master can help you to release this. Or you can try this, read this book, read that book. Maybe that would help you. So, and the second point I want to mention is regarding contact experiences, very similar to Americans or to Malaysians or even in Japan, Japanese. You get positive, neutral, and negative encounters. I don't think anything I want to extremely to highlight because it's literally very similar, to be honest. So that's what's happening in China. The contact experiences are very similar. You got Syrians, Pleiadians, Arcturians, all sorts, and got negative encounters, a neutral one who may put implants in certain people. Just try to track them, see what's going on, where they go. Just basically just want to monitor how human behavior is. So that's what I can see, like neutral, those beings. So yeah, but the government are very much watching us about what we are doing, what I share, what other people have shared, because they don't want this subject become a popular topic in China. The more you mention will trigger more people to look into that subject, which they prefer not. Another point I want to mention, I hope I'm not talking too much, just one or more points and then I'll just finalize that. There are a lot of highly spiritual, intuitive people in China. I'm talking about they may have very powerful psychic abilities. So, but what happened in China, how they manage that situation is Chinese government tend to enlist those kind of people into their own camp. So the CCP approach is not like American, in other countries, you do whatever you like. Their approach is if you have that ability and they like you, they will do whatever it takes to make you become part of them. So the way how they did is, that's what I heard from the community, is if they like you or they think you could be their asset, they don't just let you, like living in the community, in society. They will make you, fingers crossed, disappear. But in fact, you actually work for the military. So you're actually literally physically in that place, work for them. So they don't like those people just living among, other people, having a regular job. So that's the way how they control those people with special abilities, which I found is quite unique. Because I know that in America, in Australia, people having those abilities are living among, other people in the societies. So I think CCP has a different approach.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I wanna thank you for that.
Just one thing that came to mind is that one thing that's really common across with some of the spiritual attachments and basically I call it fourth dimensional phenomenon, or the astral harassment. And one thing that's common across all of Asia, of course, is the climate and the high humidity level. And just like England and Scotland, Ireland, there's a lot of ghost activity. So what I found is that the paranormal and the disincarnate and land spirits seem to be more active than in other places. So what I'm getting the feeling that a lot of people contacting Shao may have been using that as an outlet to express their entity attachment or these kind of things that are more of a 4D type of problem. So that's also a huge element to this contact mastery, and that's also one of the shortcuts that we picked up at the ESETI. So that the table is not only for dowsing information, it's also for clearing. So that's a tool that a lot of people should become aware of, because when you're not clear, it's very hard for the higher dimensional beings to create a channel and to come in, because their vibration is so high that we have to be on the ground creating a chalice, creating a vessel to receive that. So we have the responsibility on our end too.
Also, my point of view, in addition to your great point, is that I feel like that China is specifically targeted for whatever reason that is. And for a soul to be incarnated in China, it's a not easy playground for a lot of souls. You have to be very strong in order to survive in China compared with any other places. So they may face more life challenges. And I don't know what's going on, because I don't get a lot of very core messages, maybe because for personal protection reason. The more you know, the more dangerous you are. Like, true. So I feel like there's things going on in China which we don't know. There are not many people talking about what's going on in China. So I was really surprised when I got those emails. So I just want to share. We don't know, but maybe when the truth will come out, what's going on in China, why so many people are having those issues. But yeah, let's wait and see. Linda, just before I close off, could I just quickly share 2 messages from my ET guides? I think that would be very helpful. Point number 1 I want to share is they always mention to me, so I literally want to share that point in every interview I do. They very emphasize on spiritual transformation. You don't see a lot of people want to make a commitment on themselves. So they like to hear, lights in the sky, this and that, want to follow the Pleiadians. But when it comes to do some hard work on themselves, like having those life transformation, you really have to change your habits, change the way of your life, the living, everything. People tend to prefer not to make commitment. So the message I've got from my guys is mention that, share with others. We must complete, well, the must is a bit stronger words, like we have to complete the spiritual transformation. So the last point I want to mention is, I think 2023, what I've been told, it's going to be a year full of surprises and shocks, but there will be a light at the end of the tunnel. So we just have to hold onto our faith. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, I will also help to shock the world then. And Shao, by the way, I do remove entities. Okay, I do. I many years ago, I've been invited to China to remove entities. So that's another story. Okay, I can remove entities. Great.
Yeah, it becomes a full-time job. You have to don't do too much, because you become a magnet.
Yeah. Even if I were to, even if a house were to be possessed, I don't need to go to the house. I just work from the distance. That's all.
Yeah,
I don't need to be in those energies. So.
Yeah, it's really it's helping the world. That's helping the dimensions come together. So most of those beings are looking for help themselves. So yeah, it's almost an honor. Yeah.
Yeah, they inhabit beings where they are not welcome, so they need to go. Sometimes they do need to go.
The trespassing energies, yeah.
Well, I'll make sure I put both of your name in my contact list. If anyone's seeking help, I'll refer them to you. Thank you, Thank you, Taniah.
They might have to be on waiting list.
For sure.
I would like to bring just a couple of comments for Shao briefly. I know that people are reaching out to you with negative experiences, and I would like to say that might be perhaps because they're willing to risk a communication to get help with the problem, where the people who are having positive experiences don't really feel the need to risk to solve a solution. So you might be seeing a little more negative response than is really the experience across the board. Another idea I had was that, I think the human oppression of humans that is taking place there would have a tendency to create negative energies. And I'm a big believer in morphogenic fields, and that energy fields create and nurture other energy fields. And so there might be a lot of creation of negative energy fields there. And the last thing I would like to say is that for the people who are listening to this, I would encourage you to envision a space in all areas that are having with problems with oppression of positive light-filled messages, that oppression is lifting. And if you would just imagine, however it is you want to visualize this oppression, to me, I see it as like a blanket, and I can see and feel the blanket being lifted and dissolved and taken away. But if you would be so kind as to do some meditations, either by yourself or with your contact group, to set the intention and the energy that these oppressions will be lifted, I think that there'll be a great deal of people who would sincerely appreciate that. So in closing, if each of you have perhaps one final message, and we'll say goodnight.
I had this contact with the Andromedans. It's a very long story, but they tell me that they are love in action. And therefore, we must all, it's good for us to be love in action.
Thank you. That's beautiful.
That's great to hear everyone's journey. And then, of course, I think we really went deep today. So thank you. I want to do it again. I feel that it's amazing how things are, how much like the quickening, as Art Bell called it, it's really becoming so palpable. So as people's awakening quickens, the trappings that have been up there until now, like predictions and very kind of top-down channeling messages, we're really rewriting the story of contact itself here. So I think with the snippets and snapshots for what we've heard of different areas in Asia, it's going to be shedding out new inspiration for people to try some of this work themselves, or even just research a topic in general. I think also new media and the ability to share our experiences so quickly is amazing, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about people's past experiences and then stuff that's going to happen up until now. Because as we all know, a lot of UFO groups in the past have been at odds because of one thing, because of a lack of evidence. And that's what's so amazing about, C5 and other contact modalities that are happening now, is that there's no lack of evidence. There's no lack of contact. We can always look forward to what's going to happen next. So that's, in my mind, contact in action. And we're always looking forward to the next step. So we're building a bridge between two worlds and becoming ambassadors and embodiers to this new dimension. I've gone through just so many personal transformations, and in a completely different time space, even from last year. There's been a lot of sacrifice made, but it's all been totally worth it. I look to meeting all of you again in the person someday. Thanks.
Again, I really need to emphasize the need of taking action to seek spiritual transformation, life transformation. So sometimes people know a lot of knowledges, like they know a lot of things, but they don't want to put in actions. It's very important to action their agenda list and know what to do. So just be the better version of themselves. That's actually the best way to gain spiritual advancement in their life and the soul level. And the last point is always have faith. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. That's what I've been told by my guide. I just want to share. And finally, thank you so much, everyone, for listening to.
Thank you. Thank you very much, all of you. I want to say thank you to Beyond Being Human for giving us this platform today and allowing us to communicate with people who would like to have this message. And I would also say that in the case of taking action, there's not a lot of people that know, but I am currently editing an independent documentary on the spiritual changes that are stimulated because of contact. So it's going to be a little while before that's out yet. But in the vein of taking action, I can say, if you have a voice and you'd like to share it, please do. Thank you for joining us today. We enjoyed this.
Thank you, Linda. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Shao. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, Taniah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for watching.